The Valanthi Dominion had ruled the stars for 12,000 years. Their empire stretched across 1,000 worlds, and every species they had ever met had bent the knee or been destroyed. Their emperor Thalvex, the Undying, sat upon a throne made from the bones of conquered kings. He had never known defeat. He had never known fear. And he believed, with absolute certainty, that nothing in the universe could challenge his power. So when the request came for an emergency audience from Ambassador Krixa of the Morvathi, the emperor agreed purely for entertainment. The Morvathi were a broken people. The Dominion had crushed them 300 years ago, scattered their civilization across a dozen refugee worlds, and used their children as servants. What could such a pathetic creature possibly have to say that would matter? The throne room of the Dominion was vast and dark. Thousands of Valanthi nobles lined the walls, their massive bodies covered in natural armor that looked like black glass. They stood 9 feet tall on average, with 4 arms and faces full of sharp mandibles. They were predators in every sense of the word, and they enjoyed watching lesser beings tremble before them. Ambassador Krixa walked slowly down the long hall toward the throne. She was small compared to the Valanthi, with soft gray skin and 4 large eyes that never stopped moving. Her people had once been explorers and scientists. Now they were nothing. But she had come here today not to beg for her own kind. She had come to deliver a warning. She stopped at the proper distance from the throne and lowered herself to the ground in the required show of submission. The nobles laughed at her. The emperor watched with bored amusement. "Speak," Thalvex commanded. "Amuse me with whatever desperate plea you have prepared." Krixa raised her head. Her 4 eyes were wet with what humans would have recognized as tears. "Great Emperor," she began, her voice shaking, "I have not come to beg for my people. I have come to warn you. To warn all of you?" It's caused a ripple of laughter through the court. A warning? From a Morvathi? The very idea was absurd, but Krixa continued, her voice growing steadier. "Beyond the Veil Nebula, at the far edge of the galaxy, there is a small yellow star. It has 8 planets. The 3rd one is called Earth by its inhabitants. They call themselves humans." The Emperor's mandibles clicked with impatience. And why should the Dominion care about some primitive species on a single world? "Because you should not go there," Krixa said. "You should not contact them. You should not even let them know you exist. Great Emperor, I am begging you. Leave the humans alone." Now, the laughter in the throne room was loud and mocking. The Valanthi had conquered species that spanned dozens of star systems. They had defeated enemies with technology far beyond their own. And this pathetic ambassador was telling them to fear a species that had not even left their home planet. Thalvex leaned forward on his throne. "Tell me, little Morvathi, why should the mightiest empire in the galaxy fear these humans?" Krixa reached into her robes and pulled out a small crystal. It glowed faintly with stored data. "My people were explorers once," she said. "Before your conquest, we traveled far and wide, searching for knowledge. We found records, Great Emperor. Ancient records from the first travelers, the beings who seeded life across this galaxy millions of years ago. They were powerful beyond imagination. They created stars. They shaped worlds. They gave birth to every sentient species in existence." She paused, and the throne room had grown quiet. The first travelers visited Earth once. Only once. They observed the humans for a single cycle. And then they left and never returned. Krixa placed the crystal on the floor in front of her. In their final transmission about Earth, they wrote only 6 words. Just 6 words from beings who had cataloged 1,000,000 species across 1,000,000 worlds. The silence in the throne room was complete now. Even the Emperor was listening. "The words were these," Krixa said quietly. "We have made a terrible mistake." For a moment, nobody moved. Then one of the nobles let out a harsh laugh, and suddenly the whole court was laughing again. The Emperor sat back on his throne, his amusement restored. "A wonderful story," Thalvex said. "You Morvathi always did have imagination. But I think you have wasted enough of my time." "Great Emperor, please," Krixa said desperately. "The humans have detected your expansion beacons. They know you are coming. They are already preparing." You have perhaps 3 solar cycles before they reach out to make contact. I am begging you, do not respond. Do not engage. Run if you must, but do not fight them. The Emperor rose from his throne, and his full height was terrifying to behold. Run, he repeated, his voice echoing through the chamber. The Valanthi Dominion does not run. We do not hide. We do not fear. We conquer. He gestured to his guards. Remove this creature from my sight, and destroy that crystal. I will not have such nonsense polluting my archives. As the guards dragged Crixo away, she screamed one final warning. You do not understand. They are not like other species. They are not like anything you have ever faced. Please, Great Emperor, listen to me. But nobody listened. The crystal was crushed beneath an armored foot. The ambassador was thrown from the palace. And that night, Emperor Thalvex made a decision that would change the fate of the galaxy. He summoned High Admiral Zethkai to his private chambers. There is a world called Earth, he told her. Its people have detected our beacons. I want them dealt with before they become a nuisance. How many ships shall I send, Great Emperor? The admiral asked. Thalvex considered for a moment. Send the 4th Fleet. 300 warships should be more than enough to pacify a single primitive world. Bring me their leaders in chains. I wish to see what these humans look like when they kneel. The admiral bowed and left to carry out her orders. 3 days later, the 4th Fleet departed for the Sol system. 300 of the most powerful warships in the Dominion, crewed by the finest soldiers in the galaxy, armed with weapons that could crack planets and burn civilizations. None of them would ever return. The last transmission, received from the 4th Fleet, was a single burst of static that lasted for exactly 3 seconds. When analyzed, it contained only a fragment of audio, a Valanthi commander screaming a word that had no translation in any known language. The word was run. But by then, it was already too late for the Valanthi Dominion. They had made contact with humanity, and humanity had noticed them. The warning had been given. The warning had been ignored. And now, the consequences were coming. 7 days passed after the 4th Fleet entered human space. 7 days of absolute silence. No victory announcements. No battle reports. No requests for reinforcements. Not even a distress signal. The 300 warships of the Valanthi Dominion had simply vanished as if they had never existed. Emperor Thalvex refused to show concern. He told his court that the fleet was simply busy with the conquest. He said that communications were probably disrupted by the nebula. He insisted that everything was proceeding according to plan. But in private, he paced his chambers and could not sleep. High Admiral Zethkai came to him on the 8th day. She was the most decorated military commander in the history of the Dominion, a veteran of 100 campaigns who had never lost a battle. Her black armor was covered in the medals of her victories, and her 4 eyes showed no fear. But her voice was careful when she spoke. Great Emperor, she said, I request permission to investigate the 4th Fleet's silence personally. I will take the 8th Fleet, 500 warships, including 3 planet killers. If there has been some difficulty, I will resolve it. If there has been treachery, I will punish it. The Emperor agreed immediately. He wanted answers. The 8th Fleet departed the next morning. Admiral Zethkai stood on the bridge of her flagship, the Eternal Dominion, and watched the stars blur as they entered hyperspace. She had fought enemies of every kind. She had crushed rebellions and conquered civilizations. But something about this mission made her uneasy in ways she could not explain. They emerged from hyperspace at the edge of the Sol system and immediately knew that something terrible had happened. The sensor officer's voice was barely a whisper. Admiral, I am detecting debris. Massive amounts of debris. Valanthi ship signatures. Zethkai stared at the screen. The debris field stretched for thousands of kilometers around the 4th planet of the system. A red world the humans called Mars. The remains of 300 warships had been arranged in a perfect ring around the planet, like a warning sign written in metal and death. Scan for survivors, the admiral commanded. The bridge crew worked in tense silence. Finally, the sensor officer spoke again. "Admiral, I am detecting one life sign. Volanthi, it appears to be aboard what remains of the Fourth Fleet's flagship. One survivor. Out of 300 ships and nearly 1,000,000 soldiers. One? They sent a shuttle to retrieve him. His name was Captain Vral, and he had been the commander of the Fourth Fleet before. Before whatever had happened, when they brought him aboard the Eternal Dominion, he was physically unharmed. Not a scratch on his armored body, but something in his eyes had broken completely. He sat in the medical bay, rocking back and forth, his mandibles clicking in a rhythm that made no sense. The medical officers could not get him to respond to questions. He simply repeated the same words over and over again. They do not fight like us. They do not fight like anyone. They adapt. They adapt. They adapt. Admiral Zethkai went to see him personally. She dismissed the medical staff and sat down across from the broken captain. "For all," she said firmly, "I need you to tell me what happened. I need to understand what we are facing." For a long moment, Vral did not respond. Then slowly he raised his head and looked at her. The emptiness in his eyes was more frightening than any enemy she had ever faced. "We arrived in standard conquest formation," he said, his voice flat and distant. "We broadcast the demands for surrender. Standard procedure. We expected them to beg. We expected them to fight briefly and die. We expected what always happens." He paused, and his body shuddered. "They responded with a single transmission. One sentence in our own language. Perfect pronunciation. They said, 'Come and take it.'" Zethkai leaned forward. "And then, we opened fire. We hit their planet with enough energy to crack continents. We destroyed their orbital stations. We killed millions in the first hour." Vral's voice cracked. "We thought we were winning. What changed?" "They did." Vral's claws dug into his own legs. "The first day, our weapons cut through their ships like nothing. The second day, they had adapted. Our beams were being absorbed, reflected, redirected back at us. By the third day, they were disabling our shields. By the fourth day, they were boarding our vessels." The Admiral felt cold spreading through her body. "Boarding? How?" "They cut through our hull like it was paper. They moved through our corridors like shadows. Our soldiers are 3 times their size. We are stronger, faster, covered in natural armor. And they killed us anyway. They killed us with weapons they had built from our own technology. Technology they had only encountered 3 days before." Vral began to shake uncontrollably. The worst part was that they were smiling. They were always smiling. Even when they died, they smiled. Like this was a game. Like they were having fun. Admiral Zethkai stood up. She had heard enough. She needed to get her fleet out of this system, for whatever had destroyed the Fourth Fleet came for them. But as she reached the bridge and began giving orders to retreat, every screen on every ship in the Eighth Fleet flickered and changed. A human face appeared. It was a female, Zethkai assumed based on the intelligence files. She had dark hair pulled back from her face and eyes that were calm and steady. She did not look like a warrior. She did not look like a monster. She looked like someone who had all the time in the world. "Admiral Zethkai," the human said in perfect Velanathi, without accent or hesitation. "My name is Director Chen. I represent the unified governments of Earth. You have entered sovereign human space." The Admiral tried to cut the transmission. It would not respond. None of her controls would respond. "Please do not be alarmed," Director Chen continued. "We have taken temporary control of your communication systems. We wanted to ensure you receive this message clearly." She paused, and something that might have been sadness crossed her strange alien face. "We are going to let you leave, Admiral. All 500 of your ships. All of your crew. We are going to let you go home because we want you to deliver a message to your Emperor." Director Chen leaned closer to the screen, and now her eyes were not calm anymore. They were cold. Colder than the void between stars. "Tell him that we know where he lives. Tell him that we did not ask for this war. Tell him that if he sends another fleet, we will not simply defend ourselves. We will come to him. and we will show him exactly what humanity is capable of when we stop being nice. The screens flickered and Director Chen's face was replaced by a star map. On it, a single point was highlighted and labeled in Velanthy script. It was the location of the Dominion's throne world. The transmission ended. Control of the ships returned, and Admiral Zethkai gave the only order she could give. Full retreat. Maximum speed. Now, as the 8th Fleet fled human space, Zethkai looked back at the blue-green planet called Earth. It was small, insignificant, a tiny world around a tiny star, and it had just declared war on the greatest empire in the galaxy. She had a terrible feeling that the empire would lose. Emperor Thalvex sat alone in his private chambers, watching Admiral Zethkai's report for the 100th time. His court had been dismissed. His advisors had been silenced. He needed to think, and he needed to understand. 300 warships gone. 1 million soldiers dead or captured. And the humans had done it in less than 5 days. He summoned every scholar, every scientist, every intelligence officer who had ever studied primitive civilizations. He demanded answers. He demanded to know what these humans were, where they came from, and most importantly, how to destroy them. The answers they gave him made everything worse. Scholar Vanax was the Dominion's foremost expert on developing species. She had studied hundreds of civilizations at every stage of growth, from their first steps into space to their eventual conquest by the Dominion. She had never seen anything like the humans. She stood before the Emperor, the holographic display showing a small blue planet. Earth, she began, her voice trembling slightly. 3rd planet from their sun. By all rights, Great Emperor, nothing should be able to live there. She brought up images and data. Their gravity is crushing compared to most inhabited worlds. Their atmosphere is corrosive, full of oxygen that burns and decays. Their planet is unstable, covered in earthquakes and volcanic eruptions and massive storms that can level entire regions. Now, she showed images of Earth's wildlife, creatures with massive teeth and claws, tiny insects that carried deadly diseases, microscopic organisms that waged constant war on any living body. The humans share their world with predators that should have wiped them out long ago. They have survived ice ages that covered half their planet. They have survived asteroid impacts and supervolcanic eruptions. They have survived plagues that killed half their population. The Emperor's mandibles clicked impatiently. Many species survive harsh worlds. That does not make them dangerous. With respect, Great Emperor, you do not understand. Mevanax pulled up new images. Humans climbing frozen mountains where the air was too thin to breathe. Humans diving into ocean depths where the pressure would crush a Velanthy ship. Humans walking through deserts that would kill any known species in ours. They do not merely survive these conditions, Mevanax said quietly. They seek them out. For entertainment, for challenge, for what they call fun. She showed images of humans jumping from aircraft for pleasure. Humans fighting each other with their bare hands for sport. Humans deliberately exposing themselves to danger simply to prove they could overcome it. Their entire evolutionary history has been a constant war against death, Mevanax explained. Every generation, the weak died and the strong survived. But unlike other species, the humans did not simply adapt physically. They adapted mentally. They developed something that has no translation in our language. And what is that? The Emperor demanded. They call it spite. Mevanax met his gaze directly. It is the ability to endure any suffering, any pain, any loss, not because they hope to win, but simply because they refuse to give their enemy the satisfaction of seeing them fall. She pulled up recordings recovered from the 4th Fleet's wreckage. Human soldiers charging fortified positions with weapons that could not possibly succeed. Human pilots ramming their small ships into Velanathia warships when their ammunition ran out. Human engineers, wounded and bleeding, still working to build new weapons from the wreckage of their destroyed bases. Observe this footage, Mevanax said. This human soldier has lost both legs. He is dying. He knows he is dying. And yet he crawls forward, dragging himself through his own blood to throw one more explosive at a Valenthi position. He cannot win. He cannot survive. But he will not stop. The Emperor watched in silence. This is what you do not understand, Great Emperor. We Valanthi fight to win. When victory becomes impossible, we surrender or retreat. This is logical. This is sensible. This is how every species in the galaxy approaches conflict. Mevenax shook her head slowly. Humans do not fight to win. They fight until they cannot fight anymore. And sometimes impossibly, that is enough. She showed another recording. A human technician, barely more than a child by their standards, analyzing captured Valanthi weapon systems. In the span of hours, she had reverse-engineered technology that had taken the Dominion centuries to develop. They treat war as a puzzle to be solved, Mevenax continued. Every weapon we use, they study and counter. Every tactic we employ, they learn and improve upon. Every advantage we possess, they find a way to neutralize or steal. And they do this while outnumbered, outgunned, and by every logical measure, already defeated. The Emperor rose from his seat. Then we will crush them before they can adapt. We will send every ship in the Dominion. We will burn their planet to ash, Great Emperor. I must tell you something else. Avenax's voice was very quiet now. Our intelligence indicates that humans have never been truly united as a species. They fight among themselves constantly over resources, over territory, over ideas they call religions and ideologies. Their history is filled with wars against each other, and they are weak, Thalvex declared. Divided? No, Great Emperor. Mevenax stepped closer than protocol allowed. It means that until now, they have never faced a threat that required them to work together. They have never had a common enemy. They have never had a reason to stop fighting each other. She let the words hang in the air. You have given them one. The Emperor stared at the images of Earth on the display. Such a small world. Such a fragile-looking species. Soft bodies, no natural weapons, no armor, no venom, and yet they had destroyed his fleet in days. What do you recommend? He asked finally. Mevenax lowered her head. I recommend what the Morvathi ambassador recommended. Leave them alone. Withdraw from their region of space. Hope they forget about us, and if I choose to fight... The scholar was silent for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was barely audible. Then I recommend you prepare for the possibility that 12,000 years of Dominion history may be coming to an end. Because these humans, Great Emperor, they do not simply fight to survive. They fight to protect what they love. And there is nothing more dangerous in this universe than a human protecting their home. The Emperor dismissed her with a wave of his hand. He had already made his decision. He would send every ship in the Dominion. He would gather the largest fleet in galactic history. He would crush this insignificant species on their insignificant world. He would show the universe that nothing could stand against the Valanthi Dominion. But as he gave the orders to assemble the Grand Armada, a small voice in the back of his mind whispered that he was making a terrible mistake. He ignored it. He would learn to regret that. Choice: the Grand Armada of the Valanthi. Dominion arrived in Sol Space 40 days after the destruction of the Fourth Fleet. 12,000 warships emerged from hyperspace in perfect formation. 300 planet killers, each capable of destroying a world in minutes. Millions of soldiers ready to descend upon Earth like a plague of armored death. Admiral Zethkai, commanding from the bridge of the Eternal Dominion, had argued against this attack. She had seen what the humans could do. She had read the reports, studied the footage, and understood in her bones that this was not like any other conquest. But the Emperor had not listened. The Emperor never listened, so now she was here, at the edge of human space, leading the largest military force in Galactic history against a single primitive world. She expected to see Earth defenseless, or perhaps protected by a small fleet of improvised warships. What she saw instead made her heart stop beating. Earth was surrounded by ships. Not dozens, not hundreds. Thousands upon thousands of vessels of every conceivable design. Sleek military warships flying alongside converted cargo haulers, massive battle stations orbiting next to spacecraft that looked like they had been welded together from scrap metal, tiny fighters swarming like insects around larger cruisers. It was chaos. It was beautiful, and it was terrifying. The human fleet was not a military force. It was an entire civilization that had armed itself. Her sensor officer's voice shook as he read the data. "Admiral, I am detecting vessels from every region of their planet. They appear to be flying under hundreds of different flags and designations. Some of these ships should not even be capable of space travel." Zethkai understood what she was seeing. The humans had set aside every conflict, every disagreement, every ancient hatred. Nations that had been enemies for centuries were flying side by side. People who had spent their lives fighting each other were now united against a common threat the Dominion had given them, something they had never had before. A reason to work together. She opened a communication channel following protocol. "People of Earth, you are surrounded. You are outnumbered. Your technology is primitive compared to ours. Surrender now, and some of you may be permitted to survive as servants of the Dominion." The response came not from a single ship, but from every ship in the human fleet simultaneously. Millions of voices merged into one, speaking with perfect unity. Humanity does not kneel. The battle began. For the first 3 hours, the Dominion seemed to be winning. Their weapons were more powerful. Their ships were faster. Their shields absorbed punishment that should have destroyed them. Human vessels exploded by the dozens, then by the hundreds. The vacuum of space filled with debris and fire, but the humans did not break. They did not retreat. They did not surrender, and they began to adapt. It started small. A freighter captain noticed that Valanthe shields flickered for a fraction of a second whenever they fired their main weapons. She transmitted this observation to every ship in the human fleet. Within minutes, human gunners were timing their shots to strike during those flickering moments. Dominion ships that had been nearly invulnerable began taking damage. A teenager in a city called Mumbai, watching the battle through a satellite feed, noticed a pattern in Dominion targeting systems. He wrote a program to disrupt that pattern and uploaded it to the fleet's network. Suddenly, Valanthe weapons that had been hitting with deadly accuracy began missing by wide margins. A retired scientist, an old woman who had spent her life studying physics, had an idea about the frequency of Valanthe armor plating. She transmitted her theory to the fleet's engineers. 2 hours later, human weapons were punching through Dominion armor like it was made of paper. The Dominion was fighting a military. The humans were fighting as a species. Every person on Earth who had a skill, an idea, or a piece of knowledge that might help, was contributing to the battle. Scientists and engineers worked together across every nation. Children and grandparents, teachers and farmers, artists and athletes. All of them watching, thinking, helping in whatever way they could. By the 6th hour of the battle, the Dominion had lost 1,000 ships. By the 12th hour, 3,000. And somewhere around the 18th hour, Admiral Zethkai realized something that froze her blood. The humans were no longer just defending. They were attacking. Small ships. Fighters and shuttles, and even escape pods converted into guided missiles, were swarming Dominion vessels. Boarding parties were cutting through airlocks, fighting through corridors, taking ships intact. Human soldiers in improvised armor were defeating Valanthe warriors 3 times their size through speed, cunning, and absolute refusal to give up. And worst of all, the humans were learning to fly captured ships. Valanthe warships were turning against their own fleet, crewed by humans who had figured out the controls in ours. The battle had become a rout. Zethkai watched a squad of human soldiers storm the bridge of a Dominion cruiser. They were small, soft, armed with weapons that looked like toys. They should have been slaughtered. Instead, they moved through the Valanthe defenders like water through cracks, always striking where the enemy was weakest, always adapting to every countermove. One of them, a young male with blood running down his face from a wound on his head, looked directly at a recording device and smiled. Then he said something in the human language that her translator rendered as, You should have listened to the warning. By the 24th hour, half of the Grand Armada was destroyed or captured. Zethkai attempted to signal a retreat, but the humans were blocking all communications. They were jamming hyperspace frequencies. They were cutting off every avenue of escape. The remaining Dominion ships clustered together in a shrinking defensive formation, surrounded on all sides by a human fleet that had grown larger as captured vessels joined it. There was nowhere to run. There was no hope of victory. The communication screens flickered, and Director Chen's face appeared once again. "Admiral Zethkai," she said calmly, "your fleet is defeated. Your soldiers are captured or dead. You have no reinforcements coming and no way to call for help." Zethkai stared at the human woman. There was no gloating in her voice. No cruelty. Just a tired certainty. "You can surrender now," Director Chen continued, "and we will treat your crews fairly. Medical care for the wounded. Food and shelter for all. Eventually, transport back to your space. We do not want to kill anyone else today." "Why?" Zethkai demanded. "We came to destroy you. We came to enslave your people. Why would you show us mercy?" Director Chen's expression did not change, but something in her eyes softened. "Because cruelty is easy, Admiral. Any species can learn to destroy. But choosing kindness when you have the power to be cruel, that is what makes us human." She paused. "The war is over. What happens next is up to you." Admiral Zethkai looked at the shattered remains of her fleet. She looked at the human ships surrounding her. She thought about her crew, waiting for orders that would determine whether they lived or died. Then she gave the order to surrender. The humans had won. And they had won by being something the Dominion had never encountered before. They had won by being better Emperor. Thalvex sat on his throne made of bones and waited for news of his victory. The Grand Armada was the most powerful military force ever assembled. 12,000 warships against a single primitive world. There was no possibility of defeat. The throne room was filled with nobles and advisors, all of them eager to celebrate the conquest. Musicians stood ready to play songs of triumph. Servants waited with cups of victory wine. The entire court anticipated the moment when the Emperor would announce that humanity had been crushed. Then the transmission arrived. Every screen in the palace flickered. Every communication device activated simultaneously. And on every surface that could display an image, a human face appeared. Director Chen. The throne room went silent. The Emperor rose from his seat, his mandibles clicking with fury. "How dare you interrupt my court," he growled. "How dare you access Dominion communication systems?" Director Chen's expression did not change. She looked tired, the Emperor realized. Not defeated, but exhausted in the way that someone who has worked very hard feels at the end of a long day. "Emperor Thalvex," she said calmly, "I am transmitting this message from the bridge of your flagship, the Eternal Dominion. Your Grand Armada has been neutralized. 6,000 of your ships have been captured. The remaining 6,000 have been destroyed. Your crews are being treated humanely and will be returned to you." The nobles began to whisper. Some of them laughed nervously, certain this must be some kind of trick or mistake. But the Emperor saw something in the background of the transmission that silenced any hope of deception. Behind Director Chen, human officers moved through the bridge of his own flagship, operating controls that had been designed for Velanthy hands, speaking in their strange, soft language. Completely at ease on a ship they had captured mere hours ago. "This is impossible," Thalvex said, his voice barely a whisper. "I understand why you feel that way," Director Chen replied. "Your empire has never been defeated. Your species has never known what it means to lose. But you need to understand something, Emperor. We did not ask for this war." She stepped closer to the camera, and now her eyes were hard and sharp. "We were content to stay on our world. We were busy with our own problems, our own conflicts, our own growth. We knew you were out there, and we hoped you would leave us alone. When your ambassador Krixa warned you about us, she did so because she understood something that you did not." Director Chen's voice softened slightly. She understood that if you attacked us, we would not simply defend ourselves. We would become something new, something united, something unstoppable. The Emperor felt something he had never felt before. His hearts were beating too fast. His hands were shaking. He realized with a shock that went through his entire body that he was afraid. "What do you want?" he asked. "What we have always wanted," Director Chen said. "To be left alone. But we cannot simply return to our corner of the galaxy and pretend this war never happened. Too much has changed. We have seen what your dominion does to other species. We have seen the slave races, the conquered worlds, the civilizations you have crushed beneath your feet." She paused, and the entire throne room held its breath. "Here is what will happen now. You will withdraw all Dominion forces from the Orion sector. You will release every species you have subjugated over the past 1,000 years. You will return their worlds, their freedom, and their right to determine their own futures. And you will never enter human space again." One of the nobles stepped forward, his voice loud with outrage. "This is madness. The Dominion does not take orders from primitives. Emperor, send another fleet. Send 10 more fleets. Crush these insects." Director Chen turned her gaze to the noble who had spoken. When she smiled, there was no warmth in it at all. "Please do. We have learned so much from this battle. Your ships, your weapons, your technology, all of it is ours now. We have had 40 days to study it, and we have centuries of our own knowledge to combine with yours." Her smile faded. "The next time you come to our space, we will not simply defend ourselves. We will come to your worlds. We will dismantle your empire, piece by piece. And we will teach every species in this galaxy that humanity does not forget." She turned back to face the Emperor directly. "The choice is yours, Thalvex. You can accept our terms and save what remains of your empire. Or you can continue this war and watch everything your ancestors built turn to ash." The transmission flickered and changed. Instead of Director Chen's face, the screen now showed a star map. A single world was highlighted, its location marked clearly for all to see. The Dominion Throne World. "We know where you live," Director Chen's voice continued. "We know the paths your ships travel. We know the frequencies your communications use. We know everything. And if you make us come to you, Emperor, we will not be merciful." The screen went dark. For a long moment, nobody in the throne room moved or spoke. Then Emperor Thalvex slowly sat back down on his throne of bones. He thought about his ancestors, who had built this empire over 12,000 years. He thought about the 100 worlds that flew the Dominion flag. He thought about the future he had imagined, an endless expansion across the stars. The Volanthi names spoken in fear and awe throughout the galaxy. And then he thought about the humans. They had been attacked without provocation. They had been outnumbered and outgunned. They had faced the largest military force in galactic history with nothing but improvised weapons and desperate courage. And they had one more than that. They had won and then offered mercy. They could have destroyed the Grand Armada completely. They could have executed every prisoner. They could have turned their captured ships toward Volanthi space and begun a war of conquest. Instead, they had asked only to be left alone. The Emperor rose from his throne and addressed his court. "Send a message to Director Chen," he said quietly. "Tell her that we accept her terms." The nobles erupted in protest. Some called him a coward. Others demanded that he reconsider. One general even drew his weapon, shouting that he would rather die than surrender to primitives. Thalvex looked at the general with something that might have been pity. "You do not understand," he said. "In 12,000 years of conquest, I have never encountered a species that could have destroyed us utterly and chose not to. They defeated us at our strongest and then offered kindness. That is not weakness. That is strength we cannot comprehend." He turned to look at the dark screens where Director Chen's face had appeared. "The Morvathi tried to warn us. They told us to run. They told us to hide. They told us that the humans were dangerous." The Emperor's voice dropped to a whisper that somehow filled the entire chamber. They were wrong. The humans are not dangerous. They are something far more terrifying. He met the eyes of every noble in the room. They are good, truly good, and we attacked them anyway. We should be grateful that they chose to let us survive. The orders were sent. The withdrawal began. The slaves were freed, and in the months that followed, the galaxy watched in astonishment as the mighty Valanthi Dominion bent the knee to a species from a single blue world. But Thalvex did not feel defeated. He felt something he had never expected to feel. He felt hope. Hope that his people could learn from the humans. Hope that the galaxy could become something better than a battlefield. Hope that even an empire built on conquest could find a new path. In the end, the humans had not just won a war. They had shown the universe another way to be, and that, perhaps, was the most human victory of all.